Hey guys, how's it going? It's Delmer again and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to continue and show you how to use Unity. In specific, we're going to be looking at the game view, we're going to be looking at the scene view, the project, the hierarchy. I'm actually going to show you how to manipulate objects within Unity, how to duplicate them, how to align the camera with what you're seeing on the scene view. So let's actually jump into Unity and start working on it. Alright guys, so this is what we end up on the previous video, is that we created a new project using Unity 2018 3.A F1, and I show you the installation process. So in this video, what I'm going to show you is basically explaining to you what we're seeing right now, and I want to show you some of the components. How do we move objects within the scene view? How do we import objects into the project? What is this project panel? What is the hierarchy, the console, and the inspector? So we're gonna go through a lot of content, and if you guys have any questions at the end, just make sure that you tell me through the comments, because I might miss something because there's just so much to Unity, but I will make sure that I create a video if I didn't cover that too much in detail. So the first thing that I wanna do and tell you is, what you're seeing right now, it's everything that you need as far as, looking at game objects in the scene and looking at what it's getting rendered. So if you're used to a 3D tool such as Maya, Blender, or things like that, there's always this thing that is called, something that you render and then it gets displayed on the screen. So that's what the game view is. If I were to add an object to Unity, what's going to happen is it's going to show in both. It's going to show in the scene view, and it's also going to show in the game view. So how do we add an object? And that's what I want to show you next. Is right now we have what's called a scene, a sample scene. And the sample scene, every time you create a new project, that's going to be created by default, and it's always going to be called a sample scene. The other thing that you'll have in a sample scene is you'll have a camera. So if I look at the camera using my scene view, and if you press your F key, we can actually focus on the camera. If I use if I scroll on my mouse in and out, I can see, so I'm using a touchpad on the Mac, so what I'm doing is with my two fingers, I'm basically doing an up gesture and a down gesture. So if you have a mouse, you can use the scroll, the little scroll thing on your mouse to zoom in and zoom out. I think that's called the scroll wheel. And now we can see what we call the camera. So I can move the camera to the left, I can move the camera up, and these arrows right here designate the location in 3D of the movement of the camera. So if you look at the arrows right here, I can also click on these arrows and it's going to take me, so if I want to look at the Z-axis on a top view, I can click on that. If I want to look at, on the side view, the other side view, and I'm basically rotating in 3D. I can also go to the bottom and look at the camera on the very bottom. I can go and click on the cube on the middle, and it's going to take me back to perspective. And what I'm doing on my Mac is I'm holding the Option key and then basically dragging. And what I can do now is I can drag, I can drag around, and I can kind of, look at my camera from all angles. I can also use what's called the ISO view, and this is for more of isometric. So if I'm creating an isometric game, you can look and see how the camera will look like in an isometric game. If it's a regular game, then you can just go to perspective. I use that a lot as well for, if I'm adjusting and I'm placing objects on the scene. If I go to the perspective view, you can kind of see that you get more depth of what you're seeing. If I go back to the orthographic view, I can see exactly without depth where the objects are positioned. So for instance, let me add a new object to the scene. So if I right click on the hierarchy and then click on 3D object, I can create a cube. And right there I can see a cube. I can also move my camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera back. You can kind of see that the cube is starting to show on the field view of the camera. What I can also do is, if you look at these buttons on the top left, these are buttons that is going to allow us to manipulate different things. So right now I have the move tool selected. I can also use the rotate tool. So I can also move it up and then move it down. And the other thing that I can do is if I click on my perspective view, again, I can drag around and look at the field view of the camera. So the other thing that I can also do, if I select the cube, you can see that the cube gets highlighted all around. That means that I have the cube selected. You can also see that the hierarchy has it selected. So if I go and select my camera, the camera gets selected. I see properties. So this is called the inspector. And in the inspector, you'll see all the properties that are associated with the game object that you have selected. By the way, these are called game objects. So if you're always referring to something that is in the hierarchy, everything is going to be a game object. They might have different components associated with them, but these are game objects. So for instance, on the camera, I have a camera component associated with it. I also have different properties about the camera. If I click on the lighting, on the light, I can also see that this is a game object, but it also has different properties associated with it. The other thing is with the cube, the same thing. In order for this cube to render, I need a mesh render, I need a mesh filter, I also have a collider, and I'll go into more in depth of what some of these ones are. So if I go back to my cube, the other thing that I can do, if you remember, and I click on the rotate tool, and you can see that it now shows a little, kind of a, these are called gizmos, and this gizmo allows me to rotate the cube. I can rotate the cube in different axes. So if I rotate this cube, the other thing that is cool about the inspector is things that are updated in real time. So if I rotate it, let's say -45, you can see that it's -45 on the rotation. So if I change the value to -45, you can see that the cube is also rotating. I could also change the value right here. So what I'm doing right now is I'm holding my mouse button and I'm dragging from left to right, and that allows me to rotate the cube as well. I can also change this back to 0. If I want to rotate on X, I can also do that. If I want to rotate on Z, I could do that as well. I can also do the same thing with positions. If I wanted to move it on X, you can kind of see that the cube is moving, from a negative number to a positive number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it back to 0. I can do that on Y. I can move it up or down. I can also do the same thing on Z. And I can also scale this. If I wanted to, make it a different shape, I wanted to make, let's say I wanted to make it skinny because I'm making maybe a light. And I can also make it skinnier on Y. And I wanted to make it tiny. So I could also change with the scale controls through here. The other thing that I can do is if I wanted to scale it right here, I could go into my scale. So if I hover over this, it's going to show me the tooltip, which says that this is a scale tool. And you also get a gizmo here. So this gizmo allows me to scale it. I can also scale it here. And I can also scale it here. So the other thing that I want to show you is I can also use shortcuts. So I basically hold my W. If I want to rotate, I do R. And that allows me to change the gizmos. The other thing that I'm going to share with you is a site that you can go through the documentation in Unity, and these are all the different hotkeys that you can use. So if you want to pan, you can use Q. If you want to move, W, rotate, and then there's a bunch of different shortcuts that you can use. You can also customize some of them, and we can go into more detail in some of the other videos, but just know that I'm going to put these in the link of the description of this video. The other thing, if you want to look at scene view navigation, there's also more information in here in the Unity documentation that talks more about using different gestures. If you're using a Mac, if you're not using a Mac, then it also shows you some of the different shortcuts. So let's go back to the main shortcut. So I show you that you can do W, and these are some of the basic hotkeys that you're gonna have to remember for the most part if you want to improve your speed when it comes to making games. If I go W, I can change that as well. So that's how you can rotate some of these components. The other thing that I do a lot when it comes to using Unity is that I look at a lot of the stuff in the inspector. So if I'm looking at the cube, and I want to add a collider, or I want to add another component, you can also go down to the inspector area and then click on that component. And these components are everything that is available through through Unity. And if you look at, I type in RO, if I delete that, you can see everything that is available. So Unity has a lot of different components that are pretty fine and created, for you. You can look at analytics, you can look at augmented reality, you can look at adding audio, you can look at adding effects, events, and then so on. So there's a lot of different things that you can add to a component, to a game object in Unity. And you can also add scripts, which is, one of the most powerful things about Unity is that you can create C# scripts. So if I want to create a new script, I can basically, select new script, and I can name my script, and then just click on create and add, and that's going to create a script for you. So I'll do that in another video where we're going to go through, actually scripting and creating scripts so that we can manipulate our game objects. So for now, let's just go back and let me keep showing you some of the other components. So for instance, in this, I have a cube selected. So like I was saying, on a cube, you need a mesh filter, a mesh renderer, and then a collider. This is optional, but Unity added it by default. And let's say that you wanted to delete something because you didn't really want, for example, I didn't want to have a collider in here. And if I click on the setting button right here, I can click on remove component. I can also move it up because you can also change the priority of this component. So I may want the box collider to be right before the mesh renderer. I may want to move it down. I may want to, copy this box collider to another game object. Let's say that I create another game object here. I'm just gonna say, okay, I'm gonna create an empty, and that's gonna create an empty game object. We're just gonna call it cube 2. And then if I go back to cube 1 and I right click on box collider and copy component, I can now go back to cube 2 and then click on some of the components that are associated with this, which is the transform, and paste component as new. And you can see that I was able to basically paste a new box collider. So let's go back to cube, and I'm going to delete cube 2. Now the other thing that is very important and that you need to learn is that every type of component that is going to be rendered on the scene is going to have a material. So Unity by default, it's adding a default material for us, and you cannot modify these materials because this is the default material. If you want to modify the material, what I'm going to show you is how to create a new material. I'm not going to go too in detail about materials because I think that deserves a video on its own, but I want to show you how to create a basic one, and in addition, I'm going to show you what the project panel is. So in the project area, this is where you're going to have all your files and your organization. So for example, we have a scene right now that Unity created for us, and that is in a folder. The other thing that we have is we have packages. These are some of the packages that Unity added by default. It added an analytics library. It added, Unity ads. It added in-app purchases, and then so on. So here's where you'll have like your textures. So say that you wanted to create a new folder. You can right click on the main folder, create folder, and then I can say, okay, I want to have textures in here. I may want to create a new folder to store all my scripts. So let me actually go back and do that one more time because I actually created a new script. So I'm going to click on create folder and then click on scripts. Perfect. I may want to have, another folder for sound or audio. So I'm going to go into folder and say audio. So this is up to you how you want to organize it. I normally keep, a folder for things that are specific to that domain. So if I want to have scenes, I may want to organize all my scenes in this folder, also textures, and you can break this up, depending on what your team or what you prefer. So the other thing that I wanted to show you is I wanted to create a material. So I'm going to create a new folder to hold the materials. And then once I do that, you can double click this. This is basically just like your file system. You can double click on a folder to go to a folder. I can right click on this folder to create a subfolder and so on. So we're going to double click on materials. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into right click again and then click on create. And I'm going to go and find materials. So you can see you have a material option in here. So I'm going to select that. And I'm going to select and say, okay, this might be cube material. And we can name it as so. So how do you actually associate a material to the cube? And that's as easy as dragging and dropping either to that game component, or you can also do it through the hierarchy. So you have two different ways. So that actually associated the material. Let me try it one more time. Looks like that didn't work. Okay, so it looks like it worked this time. And that associated the cube material for us. So now you can see that everything in here is enabled, so it's not disabled anymore, and I can change, if I wanted to change the color of the cube, let's say that I wanted to make it a red cube, and let's say that I wanted to make it more metallic, and that will change that. So let's actually do a color that is not as, as strong as that. And you have different options. You have, albedo, which is where it's going to allow us to modify the color. You can also say whether it's going to be, have a metallic look. You can also change the smoothness, the source, and then so on. So I'll go into more details on materials on the next, one of the next videos. Okay, perfect. So we have our new material. We have folders that are created. So the other thing that I want to mention is you can kind of see that this shows a front view of the cube that we created. The other thing that we can do is, if you wanted to see the same view that you see on the scene view as you can see on the game view, all you have to do is click on the main camera, go into game object, and then select align with view, and the camera is going to align with the view that you have selected on the scene. And that's really helpful if you want to, select which area of the cube you want to see or which area of the scene you want to see. For example, if I wanted to see more of a top down area, I can go and select my main camera again, click on game object, and then align with view. Perfect. You can now see that here. So there's a lot more things that we have available in the scene view. I can also click on wireframe if I wanted to see the wireframe. I can click on shaded wireframe, which basically shows us the cube render and also a wireframe around it. And then you have a lot of different options in here that are going to allow you to look at different ways to look at your mesh. The other thing that we have available through the toolbar is we can look at the 2D view of the cube, or we can toggle back to the perspective. You also can disable lighting or enabling lighting. You can also enable sound or disable sound. And you can also click on, to toggle the skybox or not show it, basically. The other thing that I want to show you is if I click on cube, you can see the gizmos right here. So if I wanted to change, the size of the gizmos, let's say that I want to see those gizmos, let's bring our camera into view, and you can kind of see the camera has a gizmo, and that is the camera, 2D image that you're seeing. If I wanted to change the size of the camera gizmo, you can also modify that. I kind of like it to look small because when you have a lot of objects on the scene, it kind of gets in the way. So it's up to you how you want to set it. If you want to set it big or small, I recommend that you do it as small. The other thing that you have in here, you also have the option to not show it. If you want to show 3D icons or not show it, you can also show, disable the grid or show the grid. You can also do, the selection outline or disabling the selection outline, also the selection wire, and a lot more things in here that you can toggle if you want to show or not. I honestly haven't messed a lot with this, but you're welcome to, to experiment more with some of those settings. The other thing that you also have in here is you can search anything that you have in your view. If I wanted to search for cube, you can see that it also has, it not only shows me the only thing that has that name in the same view, but it actually constrained that in the hierarchy. So you can see that I only see the cube. And let's say that I wanted to see just the light. You can also see just the light from that view, and also the same view reflects those changes. So I'm just gonna delete everything because I wanna see everything. So that's everything on this view for now. And let's actually focus on the game view. So if you had multiple displays, you can also look at the display 2, display 3, and so on. For now, because I'm doing this video in only one display, I'm just gonna show you display 1. Then you also have this option of low resolution. I'm using a Mac that has Retina display, so that's what it shows me, the option to see the high resolution render of this. But if you have a regular monitor that doesn't have it, this might not be enabled for you. So I'm just gonna enable, just basically leave it in high def. And you also have a free aspect, which is what we're seeing right now. You also can do 5x4, different sizes, 4x3, and then a standalone if you wanted to look at that as standalone. So I'm gonna go back to free aspect, which is gonna be, kind of like the full view. And the other thing that you also have, you can also scale these up and down, just like you can do on the scene view if I use my wheel, my scroll wheel on my mouse, or if I'm using 2 fingers on a touch device, I can basically, zoom out and then zoom back in. And then the same thing here, you can scale these up and or scale it down. The other thing that is very, very important here to know, if I click on maximize on display and I click on play, so by the way, these buttons right here are what you're gonna be using to play your game. So right now I'm playing the game, even though this doesn't look like a real game, I'm actually playing, it's actually running a game loop behind the scenes. And if I click on pause, it's gonna pause the game and we're gonna be back in here. And if I click on this, which I actually hardly never use, I guess you can clip, you can, I don't know what it does, to be honest, because I never use it. So let me click on it, and if you hover over it, oh, okay, if you want to step, then this is going to allow you to step. If you want to go to the next frame, then you can do that as well. I hardly use that option. I always use play and pause, to be honest. So if I toggle the maximize on play one more time and hit play, what's going to happen is the game view is not going to get maximized. And this is one of the most powerful things about Unity, is that the game is actually playing, and the cool thing is I can actually change things in runtime, and I can also change things right here. If I wanted to, scale it, I could scale it while the game is running, and everything is going to work. Collisions are going to work. Everything that you're doing on the game is going to work if you make changes on the inspector, because this is what, like I was saying, is one of the most powerful things in Unity, because you can be testing, you can do things in runtime while the game is playing to test different things or to add new components. Perfect. So let's actually click on play. So if I click on play again, you're gonna see that everything is gonna get sized back to normal, and that's because things that you're changing in runtime are gonna be changed back as soon as you basically stop playing the game. So if I click on play again, things are already back. So just make sure that whatever you're changing, just make sure that you save those values if you're gonna stop the game from playing. So the other option that I have in here is I have, if I want to mute the audio or if I want to listen to audio, I also have stats. So I can see, the level, I can see clipping, I can see, my frames per second, how things are running, the CPU. So this is pretty helpful when you want to, look and see how your game is running. So statistics are really, really important. We're also going to go into the profiling in one of the next videos, which is going to allow us to, help us understand what resources we're using for our game. So for now, this is a kind of like a quick view of how the game is running in the editor. So we can click on stats again to hide it and show it. And again, you can toggle the gizmos even on this view if you wanted to see some of those gizmos as well. So I'm just going to click on gizmos again. The other thing that we have in here that I briefly mentioned is we have all these different options that is going to allow us to manipulate our game objects. So if I click on the pan option, I can pan around. If I click on this option, it's going to allow us to move an object. If I click on the up arrow and down arrow, that's going to allow us to rotate the objects. And I can also do Command C or Control C to undo. And if I use the scale tool, it's going to allow us to scale the object. Perfect. And I'm just undoing that. And I also have a rect tool and also a move or rotate scale selected objects tool. The other one that is very important is the pivot and the global. So if I go back to my move tool, you can see that if I want to move my object on a local axis, I can do it. So you can toggle between global and local by doing this. I can also move an object around the pivot area, or I can do it around the center. So those are some of the other additional options that are going to be very helpful when you're modifying and adding other objects. So the other thing that I didn't mention is you can also clone this object by holding either Command D on your Mac or Control D on your Windows machine. So I'm going to do Command D, and you can see that I can clone those objects. I can keep cloning it, and it's also showing how I'm cloning it on the hierarchy. If I want to delete an object, I can simply, select it and then hit delete to delete it. Well, I'm on a Mac, so I'm just gonna do Command delete, and the same thing here. and perfect. So that's going to allow us to delete the object. So I think that's everything that I'm going to mention in this video. There's a lot more things that I want to mention. So let's pause right here. And if you guys have any questions about, anything that I mentioned, let me know through the comments. And don't forget to share and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys.